Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dennae Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur.
On the podcast with us today, we have Zach Zelner. Zach, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Hey, Zach, I wanted you to get us started by talking to us a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur and where your current focus is right now.
So I've jumped into a lot of different ventures and industries. I've been in healthcare. I've owned a chain of cookie delivery bakeries, have been in cannabis, and most recently launched something in the e-commerce space called PupSocks, where we print custom socks with your dog's face on it, which has been a real wild ride. You know, it grew to $8 million in sales in 30 days and became quite an adventure.
People love their pets, right?
They do indeed. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to Christmas time, if you can present something, it's custom and a great stocking stuffer like that, you can catch fire.
I know we're going to dive into some of your tough decisions, but I really want to talk a little bit, about how you were able to scale it to that level that fast. What were some of the things and some of the key things that you did to get it to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything else, the advent of paid social media is critical there. A lot of people sort of expect things to go organic or to go viral organically, and that's just not how it goes. So by its very nature, if you have a product that is a good fit within a market, you can really blow it out of the water by running ads. We ended up becoming one of Facebook's top 2017 success stories. And, the very purpose of Facebook's advertising model is to drive traffic to businesses that have a good fit.
Well, I want you to talk through some of the tough decisions as you were growing that business, as well as, any of your other businesses that you have as well and different ventures that you've been in. I want you to talk about a tough decision that we first want to go over one that's called a sore thumb tough decision. So it's a tough decision that, anytime you're sitting down having a cup of coffee with somebody and said, hey, what are some bad decisions that you've made as an entrepreneur? Wouldn't necessarily be, ones that you'd want to do again, but you're glad you went through those decisions or those outcomes because it helped you, shape yourself right now as a leader in your current, organization. And so discussing some of the lessons that you learned through that tough decision.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a counterintuitive one because my tough decision and one that had a poor outcome was raising capital for a business that really should have just been buried. I was running a tech company called Penny, and our numbers look good. They look good on paper. Our margins were poor. They were getting worse. And we had a lot of investor interest. Somewhere deep down, though, I struggled to fully see how we could dig ourselves out of this. And there was a thought in the back of my mind to say, do we just take this capital so that we can resolve these issues and come out on the other end? Or do we bury it and move on? The big thing that I realized here after raising capital and subsequently selling the company to a competitor for far less than the money we raised, and we're not talking about, pennies here, it was a $2 million round of funding, was that investors can make a lot of bets because they can, split cash among companies and make decisions that way. But I only have one life. I only have, each year to give, and I gave 2 to a company that I didn't have visions of, becoming successful to the levels that I otherwise expect. And that was a big mistake because the opportunity cost of those years is significant and something I can't measure, but it was a poor decision.
So, Zach, looking back on that, were there any red flags or anything that you maybe missed going into that and deciding to raise the funding as opposed to putting away the company that you would maybe catch going forward now that you've been through that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that it's missed. And I don't think it's easy to see these things. I think it's hard to act on them, right? I think it's easy to ignore them. For myself, that was really a question of, did this business have a sustainable and scalable model? Scalable is really the key word here. We were operating in different, markets, but had to get on the ground and launch efforts and set up offices and hire delivery drivers and, hire developers. And it was not a scalable approach to building a company. And that's the big thing here. There are a variety of ways to make money, right? There are a variety of ways to make more than $0. But there aren't necessarily a lot of opportunities that are scalable. And if you don't have that figured out, then there's no point in taking investor capital, because ultimately you're always going to need more. It's going to be this treadmill because there's no solution to the problem. You keep throwing, fuel and hoping that at some point it just starts rolling on its own. And we didn't have that model built out.
Well, and I think this could be applied in even some of the smaller, entities and smaller entrepreneurs that, have a business that they get emotionally caught up in and they just won't let go, even though it's losing money and draining money. And like you said, there is no scalability to it. And they just end up losing more and more money to the point where they can't put any more money into it. And it's because a lot of the entrepreneurs go into a business going, I have, hundreds of thousands of dollars or a couple $1 million and I can keep this business going, because everybody says it takes 2 or 3 years to turn a profit. But I think, a lot of people, because they put that 2 or 3 years into it, when it gets to that 2 or 3 year mark and they're still losing money and they haven't made any money, they feel like, that maybe they're just right around the corner. And it is a fine balance, because I know a lot of businesses, that we've talked to even on the podcast here that have, gone 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years not turning a profit. Then all of a sudden one day they turn a corner and all of a sudden they're profitable and they just continue and they just go on this track of success. And so it is a fine balance, and every different, situation, every business is different on their track. But I think what you said is there that component of scalability to it?
Yeah, it's a question of how you define quitting, right? I like the idea that quitting is not giving up. It's choosing to focus your attention on something more important. And that doesn't discount the importance of what you were doing, but entrepreneurship in this day and age, if you go online, you go on Instagram, there's all this entrepreneurship porn where everyone is telling you, never quit, you make it. And it's really something where we're not talking about whether or not you'll make it. We're talking about whether or not this will make it. And if you can't take the lessons from here and pivot in some way, shape, or form, you're gonna die.
That's a great tip there, Zach, because I think you're right. Because I look at a lot of those little quotes that they have online and various things that people say, and you're right. It just because your business that you created a year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that's losing money. If you let go of that, like you said, it's not you're giving up or you're quitting. It's I've decided that in my entrepreneurial career that didn't work. So let's move on to the next thing and continue that process.
Exactly right. And actually, Dennae, to really answer your question, even more specifically, I think that the best metrics for success, more than anything else, are just LTV, lifetime value. Because a lot of people do not consider how important it is to have customers that viciously and aggressively love your business. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful. I don't care if you only have 20 customers, but those 20 customers need to adore you.
Well, and I think it's hard to, for a lot of businesses to determine how much money they're willing to spend to acquire a customer unless they know that lifetime value of a customer.
Precisely.
Well, let's shift here a little bit and talk about a tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur that had a really good and positive outcome and some of the lessons that you learned through that one.
Sure. Yeah, the biggest thing that I always preach is to test and validate ideas. And one of them that was, a little on the crazier side, but worked out well, was selling $40,000 of PupSocks before we had even figured out how to make a pair of PupSocks. And I say this, I was in a position where I could have bought equipment. The equipment was 30 to 40 grand, but I would have been, in a room full of equipment with no guarantee that this would work. And frankly, if I did that with the 10 ideas I had beforehand, I would have been $500,000 in the hole with nothing to show for it. Mm-hmm. So, we built PupSocks website, we put together some ads, and we started testing. And we ran for 2 to 3 weeks. It was going very, very well. And at that point, we emailed all the customers and said, "Ooh, we're accidentally back ordered. We're so sorry. Do you want a refund?" And you know how many refunds we issued? None. Wow. Not a single one. Because everyone felt comfortable with the fact that they would get their order in a month. It was a small company. They, accepted our apology. We gave a discount and threw in a freebie. And all of a sudden now, my exposure was 0. And that's something that a lot of people overlook. And that alone is a major component to people being successful. Everyone, comes to me and says, how can you bear so much risk? And frankly, I don't bear any risk. I validate everything that I do. And once I have enough signals saying this is going to be great, then I run headlong. But I only run headlong once I have the confidence that it's going to work out based on validation from anyone else. I don't trust my gut. I trust the data.
Well, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, can get caught up in, the perfection of getting something created, whether it be a product or a service. And in this situation, obviously a product, making sure that it's perfect before you actually release it. But I think what you did was very smart, because you validated that there was actually an audience that was out there that really wanted this before you even got to the point of really perfecting it. And I think, as you started to validate that there was an audience there, you were able to now have the funds and the money to be able to validate that process. And it kind of goes back to, what I preach a lot, which is version 1 is always better than version none.
That's right. That's right.
Zach, talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you use when you are facing a difficult decision.
Yeah, that's a good one. Again, leaning on some of that data is really, really important, but that's sort of a cliched response. I think that everyone needs to have an arc of people who they trust, who can help guide them, and more importantly, who know them really, really well. I have 5 or 6 people who aren't necessarily experts, but they're experts in me, if that makes any sense. Because doing something that isn't fully aligned with who and what you are, with what your goals are, is always, even if it's wonderful advice, always going to lead you astray. So I always lean on, my mentors and my closest friends who know who and what I am and help me navigate difficult decisions in a way that has a positive outcome and that fits me rather than fits them or fits someone else.
All right, we are going to take a quick break and hear from one of our show sponsors. When we come back, we'll talk to Zach about some of his favorites as it relates to his life as an entrepreneur.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com.
And we are back with Zach Zelner. And Zach, we're going to go through a series of quick questions and answers that we call the trifecta by having you start us off with your favorite technology that you use in business that helps make your life easier every day.
Slack, 100%.
What is a favorite quote that you've heard that's helped you as an entrepreneur?
Work hard at work worth doing. And then Thomas Jefferson, the harder I work, the more luck I seem to have.
And what's a favorite book that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
I'll recommend 2 here: Smarter, Faster, Better, and Make Your Bed, Admiral McRaven.
What's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
I'm launching a startup in the education space. So from here, I'm looking to pursue concepts that have a place in society and have an element of social capitalism to them.
Zach, how can the listeners reach out to you if they're interested in following you or finding out more about the companies that you have?
Best place to do it is Instagram, at ZACHZELNER.
Very good. Zach, we really appreciate the time. We've enjoyed talking with you and hearing your insights from your experience. We'll look forward to following you and perhaps having you on a future podcast.
Likewise. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.